that camera going.
There we go. What's up?
How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Where are you located?
I am living in beautiful Ashland, Oregon, home of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival.
Oh, cool, man. Very cool. Yeah, I'm in Kansas City, so we get a little bit of a festival here. Um, but I like
You
the
got the
guitars and the
year-round
motif.
barbecue festival.
Oh man, the barbecue's everywhere. And then of course we got the dynasty now with Mahomes, Saint Mahomes on his horse. So it's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, I gotta love that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still really weird because when I was growing up, I grew up in a suburb called Liberty, and they used to do training camp, and it was no big deal. It was in the dark ages. They never won. And the cops used to
Uh-huh.
hand out football cards. So we'd go up and they'd autograph them, and we'd play basketball because it was the William Jewell College was kind of a small liberal arts college up there. So we kind of had the run of the place. And I just can't believe that they're this dynasty because when you go to training camp now, it's like this major operation. It's a big deal, so it's weird.
Yeah.
But
Well, I grew up in Southern California, and my dad is uh this is a weird sentence, but it's true. He's one of the people who helped invent bass fishing as a television sport and as a sport. He's
wow.
in the Western Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, freshwater, etc. And because of that, he was sitting at his desk in 1968 or 9 after writing an article about fishing in Mexico, and some guy, the phone rang, and this is back, there's like him and the owner and one other person running this magazine and newspaper for fishing on the West Coast. And this guy says, "Hey, is this Bill Rice?" Says, "Yeah." I said, "This is Merlin Olsen." And my dad, who's huge Rams fan, was like, "Yeah, whatever." And so the guy called back. He's like, "Don't hang up on me." He's like, "How do I know you're Merlin Olsen?" He said, "Ask me anything." He says, "Well, what's your brother's name, Phil? How many sacks did you have yesterday? Two and a half. Why are you calling me? I want to go fishing."
Oh,
So I was growing up, my dad's best friends were Larry Brooks, Jack Youngblood, Rich Saul, um, Nolan Cromwell came over to our house, Bob
wow.
Brzezinski, and yeah, so adjacent football adjacent stories.
That's great, man. I mean, and that makes total sense. Sport players love to either golf or fish. That's their thing.
Yeah,
They got to
or
like
hunt.
hunt, exactly. So they got to get it out of their mind. That's great, man. What a great story. Um, So let's dive into your story. Let's get into your history. And I want to know first and foremost, 4 years ago with this pandemic, it really threw everything into a tailspin. I'm curious how you survived that time period and how it changes the way that you do things now.
Oh man, well, I mean, I had a business. I mean, phew, there's a lot of questions in there. At the time, um, let's see, my I've got three kids. They're all musicians. You're kind of looking at the luckiest dad in the world, meaning like I would get texts from my kids saying, "Can you come home early from work so we can play music?" Uh, I've got a little music room over here, and I've got like 500 recordings of us playing live and
Wow.
studio versions that we do. We even have, Spotify and Apple. We have a band. It's up there.
Yeah.
But my I had a business with a couple people working for me in technology. We work with manufacturers, web to ERP and back, integrations and whatnot. And it was weird because, well, first of all, I sent everybody home and we went digital or remote right away, which wasn't too hard for us because we were working with people all over the U.S.
Yeah.
And but because I was in manufacturing, every single one of my clients, which I have a hugely long client retention, like my clients don't really leave me very often. My average client retention is up to like 13 years or something like that. It's unheard of in the industry.
Yeah.
But my business basically worked about 50% on stuff. They're like, I need this done right away. And another 50 was big projects like we're doing this, $500,000 ERP thing, and we want you to be the project manager and manage all the other vendors. And every single one of those companies on March 16th of that year said we're putting the kibosh on all major projects, but all the other little things that are happening every day were still happening. So my revenue got cut in half instantly.
Wow.
Which that was, it was troubling, but it actually worked out. I didn't have to fire anybody. I'm the way I run my businesses, and it's led to the kind of things that I do in business, is I want to have a business that I would be proud to work at. And at some point, things actually did get tight. And I went to my staff and I said, you know why it's tight. And we all, we want to make a living and nobody wants to get pinched. So I now make the whatever the most of any one of you makes, I make, and we need to cut back our budget. So if we're gonna have, I'm not gonna ask you to take a cut and pay, and I'm not gonna take a cut and pay. So first, I'm taking a cut from wherever I was to the most, highest paid employee, and
Yeah.
then if we can talk about this, let's all take a pay cut so that we can get through this area here. And if any one of you is like, I can't make my mortgage, like then we'll talk about it and we'll figure that out, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't didn't have anything to do with merit, longevity, skill set, or whatever. It was just like, how are we going to get through this? So that's how I got through it business wise.
Yeah.
Personally, it was like I don't know. My wife and I referred to it as sort of a extended Christmas. We had three boys in college, one at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, one in New York, one at Fordham, and one at Lewis and Clark in Portland. And they all came home from spring break thinking that the schools had announced, oh, we're going to have an extra 2 weeks of spring break and we'll see what happens. And then a week into that, they said, we're going to go 2 months. And then it was just, don't even come back here.
Yeah.
And so we were already empty nesters, my wife and I, but now we had all three of our kids back in the house.
Wow.
So we sat down, my wife and I, just without the kids, and just said, look, like, this is like Christmas. We get an extended Christmas. We get an extension of being empty nesters. We get something a lot of parents don't get at this age of their children.
Wow.
So, so I played a lot of music with my kids. That's where we put a big H1 or a little old H1 Zoom mic in the middle of our room. And we just played a lot of cover songs and some originals and recorded them all. And
That's cool, man. That sounds
yeah,
like a great, almost glorified kind of, time to just recollect and find what's important in your life. That's great.
for sure. And I made most of my decisions in life have been made around lifestyle. And, that one was made for all of us. And
Yeah.
then you get to hopefully be in a position to choose the lifestyle that you want. And I know that wasn't true for everybody in the world or even our country. So
Yeah.
very fortunate.
So I do want to get into the music, but before we do that, I want to get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day, and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer him?
I help people be better business people and better partners and better bosses for their employees so that everybody acts good.
Plays well together.
People are
What?
good. They're gooder people.
Yeah, hey, gooder people. I like it. So, what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
I grew up thinking I was going to be a fisheries biologist my
Okay.
whole life because of the bass fishing thing. I mean, I grew up fishing a lot. I have fished. You're looking at somebody who probably like the most famous adjacent, but not famous person ever. Like if you made a list of the top 50 bass fishermen from the 70s and 80s, I've fished with all of them.
Wow.
And then there's the Rams thing.
Yeah.
Um, and but yeah, I grew up fishing a lot. I traveled around with my dad, did a lot of hunting at hunting clubs and stuff like that with once again with the Rams. And in fact, what's his name? Getting the name of the Rams uh, running back at the time taught me how to shoot a shotgun.
Wow. That's
It'll come to me.
crazy.
But yeah, I was a fishing guide in Alaska. I was a very outdoors kid, very athletic. I was never the best on the team, but I was always good enough. What I lacked in skill, I made up for in uh, stamina.
Yeah.
I could run all day long on a soccer field or a basketball court, and like I was the sixth man on the basketball team, and I got more playing time than some of the starters because I would never tire out. I'm rambling around here, but getting back to as a fishing guide, rock climbing instructor, mountaineering instructor, hard goods buyer. I worked at REI and Adventure 16. I've rock climbed all around the world, traveled around the world. I've driven across the United States 9 times, east west. I've been all over British Columbia and Alaska. A lot of travel. I ran a travel store for 8 years that had a international footprint, which is sort of how I ended up in this technology world.
Yeah.
I mean, my life's weird. I was an art major who ended up with a sociology degree from a pre-med university, UC Irvine.
Wow.
And then here I sit, working in technology and leadership, still into the outdoors. Ashland here. I'm 30 minutes from, I don't know, 4 or 5, maybe an hour, 4 or 5 of the best whitewater rafting and steelheading rivers on the West Coast.
Wow.
And I go kayaking a lot and surfing out at the coast, and
So
so
your level of adrenaline adventure is just on a level that's way, way, way sky high.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not hardcore in any of those.
Right.
I'm not a class 5 hard shell kayaker. I'm a class 3 inflatable kayaker. But once again, what I lack in skill, I make up in water time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm I know some kids who basically like do the what are the squirrel suits and with the cameras on their heads, and
Yeah.
they do stuff that's really crazy, like kids in town that grew up with my kids. And I'm not that kind of adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
At the same time, I've been 1,000 feet up in the air, placing my own pro in a rock, in a cliff, and felt very confident. So um, ah,
So
I'm blessed.
yeah, absolutely you are. So I got a couple offshoots here. First of all, what's the first concert you ever saw that blew you away as a music guy?
Uh, And when I was really young, it might have been 6. I went. My parents took me to a concert. I didn't know what I was going to see. I found out later it was Waylon and Willie, Merle Haggard, and it was out in the dusty Chino Hills of Southern California. I basically saw like one of the original outlaw kind of country concerts, right?
Yeah.
Um, the first concert I went to was Big Country that I wanted to go to as a teenager was Big Country and Wire Train at the Hollywood Palladium.
Yeah.
I've seen the Grateful Dead 50 times. I've followed them a bit. Love and Rockets 12 times. Every band from the 80s that you can think of that's in the alternative genre, I've seen them. My high school mantra with my friends was 405, 605, 5101, which is the directions to the Hollywood Palladium from where I grew up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was in Orange County, right at the beginning and middle of the OC punk scene.
Yeah.
And so once again, like sort of music or famous adjacent. I saw Social Distortion play at a college chuck wagon thing in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And I waited tables at Spaghetti Factory in Newport Beach. And, um, you know, I don't know, Mike Nash from Social D. I saw Mike Watt and his wife Kira when they were in Dose in a small apartment in like 1989 or 90 in
Oh,
Irvine. Agent Orange, which is a great band.
yeah.
Mike Palm used to come in and like I'd serve him wine. Seen Henny Rollins numerous times, Lost Club, doing
Yeah.
poetry stuff. And once again, just adjacent.
Yeah, that's great, man. So who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration for you in all of these things that you've done in your life?
Um, I think most of my inspiration comes from music. I mean, even in the technology stuff that I do for a living, there's an art to thinking about technology, and I absolutely love music. I've got a song going on in my head. I can call up tunes from the 80s and hear them. Um, I'm slightly synesthetic, I think is the right word. Like when I'm playing music, I forget what I'm doing and I'm like looking at images and pictures and things while I'm playing.
Yeah.
So music that moves me, which is a lot. I'm kind of a sap, that's super inspirational. And as a songwriter, once again, and I've never tried to go get famous. I had a chance to go on tour with some people, and I was like, nah, I don't want to live in a van
Yeah.
down by the river.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the band that I have with my kids is called Lower, but with 2 O's instead of an O and E, and it's named after both the band Low, which
Yep.
is a slowcore band that's been around forever, and unfortunately, Mimi Parker passed away, the singer, last year, and also the B side of David Bowie's Low album,
Yeah.
which I always jokingly say is the best album that Brian Eno ever did,
Yeah.
because they did it together. And my kids all love both of these. Um, I love all sorts of alternative music. But pretty much the only thing I don't like is pop country and pop music. It hurts me.
Right. What about
But
what about Wilco? Do you like Wilco?
I love Wilco. In fact, I
Okay.
read his book on how to write songs
Yeah.
just to see what he said. It was just like loosened me up and said, "Quit worrying about it." Is what the book said.
Yeah, they just released the new album, which is pretty good. So I'm always
Yeah.
looking out for those guys. But so I'm curious if you can meet anybody on the planet right now. You've obviously met a lot of people. You've been all over the world. But if you can meet one person alive right now that you find fascinating, spend some time with them, who would it be?
Uh, um, I'd have to go spiritual and say the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, I dig it.
You know, um, maybe also Alan. Maybe if I could get Alan Sparhawk from Low and the Dalai Lama in the same room, that would be pretty cool.
That would be that'd have to be documented. So I'm curious. I'm always piqued because I love travel too. Of all the places that you went to, what was one of the most magical places that you just unexpectedly hit you in a place where you're like, wow, I had no idea and you totally loved it?
There's a lot of those. The my one of my favorite places in the world is Chiang Mai, Thailand, and most people talk about Chiang Rai, but I remember being in Chiang Mai and I had this sort of like it reminded me of Paris in a weird way because Paris has the freeway that goes around where the old fortress wall used to be,
Yeah,
and Chiang Mai has an old town that, of course, is much older than Paris that has a wall that's still there. And the thing that was interesting is like, Paris has done a good job at keeping all the skyscrapers out of the center of town. And that's one of the charming things is the way it's built like that. Chiang Mai is the same way. You get out by the airport, which is like downriver or whatever, and then that's where all the businesses are. But the downtown, if you want to call it that, is Old Town, is really charming. And we just happened to be there on sort of their version of the Day of the Dead. And what was moving is my wife and I had just lost her mom to cancer, and her mom absolutely phenomenal, amazing human being. And I mean, this is 1998, so a long time ago, 97, 98. And we knew that we were going to have kids, and we had just gone through this traumatic experience taking care of her while she was slowly dying. And yeah, and then ended up in Chiang Mai during this festival. And they do that thing where you have the hot air sort of canvas things with they had a palm tree soaked in, or a piece of a palm tree soaked in paraffin wax. You light that and you get the lit balloons that go up, and there's just thousands of them. I mean, I would definitely call that magical and a little
yeah,
cathartic.
yeah.
Um, also, I think I have a passion for small towns all over the world. Like when my wife and I travel now, we'll pick a small town, and instead of traveling around, we go to that place and we get to know it really well. So, like San Sebastian, Spain's one of my favorite places in the world. Pucón, Chile is fantastic. I love Santiago because it reminds me of LA where I grew up. It sits in a valley, gets lots of smog. There's lots of traffic. It's funny how much I love Santiago. So yeah, how's
That's
that for an
great.
answer?
That's great. So what has been the motivation for you, not only business wise, but personally, to have such a thirst for seeing the world and getting out there, having different career paths, all of these things that make you who you are? What is that that gets you up every day that makes you that?
Gosh, I mean, maybe it's just a love of people, um, and a love for experience. I'm not a Zen master by any means, but I do often think like this could be my last day on this planet. Like, what am I going to do? And I'm a very, even though the what Briggs Myers scale puts me right in the middle of introvert and extrovert, everybody around me believes I'm an extrovert, and I am, and I can make friends wherever I go. I just live for that experience. And here's an answer. Long time ago, somebody asked me that, and I forgot about this answer. And they sort of asked me like, about spirituality and God. And I was raised a Southern Baptist in Southern California, and not then nor now do I believe in God, especially the Christian God. And I don't mean any offense to anybody. It just wasn't right for me.
Sure.
And but somebody said, well, what is it for you? And there's one is like outdoors is much more spiritual than inside any church, regardless of denomination. But
Yeah.
the other thing is kind of like if two people talk in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it happen? You know? And to
Right.
me, like if there's a God in this world of spirituality, it's in the interactions between people.
Yeah. I dig that.
I mean, where else do we feel the strongest emotions consistently? Like you don't necessarily feel you're not going to go lean against a tree and have the same emotions you can have as if you're hugging your future wife,
Yeah.
boyfriend, or something.
Yeah. I
Uh,
totally get it. That's deep. No, I love it. That's totally true. And I think that was the thing about living through the pandemic is we realized even though we were connected, it was that personal touch. It was that human connection that we all had. And
yeah.
that definitely takes precedence.
Well,
Um,
what did you do during the pandemic, Joe?
Man, I'm a busybody. A lot of what you talk about is exactly the way I roll. I went out and about. I was, driving with the kids. I amped up a lot of interviews I was doing with jazz musicians, and I have a jazz radio show, so I'd let the
Nice.
kids listen. So there was
Mhm.
cats that were in New York that like totally fled and went to Costa Rica. And my stepdaughter still talks about one guy. His name was Theo Hill. He left New York City. He was an established jazz pianist. He sold everything and became a surfer in Costa Rica. So there was all these macaws in the background squawking. You could hear the ocean, and it was just really dreamy. So I was just getting out there and trying to just the world had a monopoly on us. We had to keep living, and I just wanted to get out and just feel everything in
Yeah.
the way that I always do. But it was the architecture was different, but it was the same philosophy. So um but it was good. I mean, it was great. The kids still remember the interviews. They remember the things that we did. At one point, I lived next to a nature sanctuary where people fish, of all things, all the time. And we saw a bald eagle. And I remember
Uh-huh.
looking over at another car, and there was this guy that got out that had a huge telephoto lens, and he almost looked like he was going to cry. And he said, I've been waiting to see that for like 8 years. And I think the earth slowed down enough. I think everything was different in March of 2020, where everything just kind of felt like it needed to open up and anyway, so those were magical moments for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where were you? The sanctuary you were talking about?
it was right next to me. It's called James A. Reed, and I live in Lee Summit, which is south of Kansas City, and it's just a
Okay.
big nature preserve out there.
Cool.
So yeah, so I'm curious of all these things that you've done in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Oh, my kids,
Yeah.
far and away. And that might sound trite, but no, I'll brag a little bit. Like my oldest kid, Julian, works for the Department of Energy in the climate sciences division and does hurricane modeling. He's 24 years old.
Wow.
Last week he was quoted in the New York Times.
Wow.
And he's just brilliant. And he uh, yeah, he was like the lead. He's 24. He was the lead researcher on this project, and he's got these other projects he's working on where he's gonna basically start mapping thousands of old hurricanes across theoretical Atlantic garbage patches, because there's a surface tension there that you can see via radar. The waves are lower. The waves are lower. The wind's higher. The water's warmer because there's more surface tension. All that stuff affects hurricanes, and he can model it all. He's got
Wow.
access to the largest database of natural data in the world.
Wow.
And then my other two kids they're identical twins. They're mirror twins, in fact, which is a funny thing. I'm a twin. I never heard of mirror twins, but one was a philosophy major and an English minor, and one was an English major and a philosophy minor. They're both musicians. One's basically jazz drummer who plays metal and noise music,
Nice.
and the other one is a guitarist. And he wants to be a fantasy writer, and the other one is actually an excellent poet.
Wow.
One of the professors said he's the best poet to ever come through this university. It's like a 100-year
Wow.
old university.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, they're just neat people.
Yeah.
I always figured my job was not to f them up.
Yeah, right.
They came out who they are, and if I just, so
Yeah. That's great. So I'm curious in all these incarnations in your life, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, well, I mean, I'd like to think that I'm extremely kind and that I'm a good listener. And I think most people think that. They also, I think I'm a storyteller. I do tend to use 1,000 words when 10 will do. Um, and Yeah, I mean, I would guess I'd say like I'm a compassionate person. I am routinely thrust into leadership roles that I don't ask for, and I think part of it is that I'm 6'3", have a deep voice, and I'm a Caucasian American. So I try to be conscious and conscientious of that.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know, how's that for an answer?
I love it. I absolutely
Pretty
love it.
good.
So my final question is, if you could get into a time machine and you could go anywhere in the history of time and see one event with your own eyes, where are you going?
Uh, I think I'm going to go to Les Deux Magots in Paris with Gertrude Stein and Hemingway
Yeah.
in sometime in the 20s. And maybe I get lucky and I bump into Picasso and George Braque and whoever else, Dolly. That's where I would want to. And when I go to Europe, that's what I'm looking for is like art galleries and yeah.
There was a tea room in Rome that I saw that all those cats used to hang out in. It had
Uh-huh.
a green awning on it, and I remember someone was telling me there was a guide there that was like, that's where Hemingway and all of the poets and everybody hung out. And I was so bespeckled by it. So that's such a
Yeah.
great answer. Um,
That's one
so
of the great things about traveling around the world is like you go. I remember being in Barcelona, and there's a place there called Los Caracoles, and on the wall there's a picture of Papillon and another one of John F. Kennedy and
yeah,
Winston Churchill, and you have to walk under the hams by the kitchen to get into the dining room. Like that's cool.
that is cool. Totally. So, hey, if anyone wants to reach out, they want to learn more about what you're doing, any of the good business in your world, where do they go?
Well, if they, we didn't talk necessarily about the globally conscious leader, but I'm the outreach coordinator, basically international development coordinator for the Globally Conscious Leader. We believe that there are leaders at every level inside an organization, from the janitor on up. And that's a place where we have free classes for people to learn leadership skills, management skills. We want people to succeed. So all our classes are free. They're always free. We'll be adding more. And it's at thegloballyconsciousleader.com. Additionally, there are paid coaching. We call them coach peer circles because you're with people in a weekly group. You don't have to show up weekly. And I like to say that, if you think that coaching is expensive and not right for you, then you need to check this out, because for a couple $100 a month, you get to learn a lot. And I, right before this, I made a discount code. Oh, now I'm going to forget I think it was Dimino 724,
Okay.
or 50% off any of the Coach Pierce circles.
Okay.
Normally, I think they're $300 or $400 a month, but this would make them like $150, $200.
Perfect.
And to me, the ROI on that's great, because if you're working a $60,000 a year job as in the marketing department, you want to be the marketing manager, that could be a $30,000 raise.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So my mom always said, invest in yourself.
Yeah.
And so I do that. Musically, I'd say, like, go check out Lower, Lowor. It's fun. We have 5 cover albums.
Nice.
We did Wire's Pink Flag from cover to cover. We did Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division from cover to cover. But then we have our own album that we released called Things We Lost in Space,
Cool.
which is influenced by Wire and Spiritualized and Joy Division and Low and whatnot. And I'd also actually put a pitch out for this. We're putting together an album called To Mimi with Love, which is Low cover songs, and all the proceeds are going to support cancer, um, support women with cancer. And
Yep.
I have a friend here in the Valley who's the president of a national cancer organization. So we're gonna donate all the money to that, and I'm looking for a few musicians and bands who would like to join doing that.
Yeah.
So they can email me at steve@thegloballyconsciousleader.com, and if they're interested, they can add a song to the list. It's fun.
Absolutely. Steve, this has been fascinating. I know I got sidetracked on other things, but this scratches the surface. I'm urging everyone to get out there and delve into your world. Thank you very much. This has been fascinating.
Thanks, Joe. This is the most interesting interview I've ever been a part of.
Oh, cool. Excellent.